So a couple of videos back, I did a video where I talked about the lessons I learned in my 20s that have kind of prepared me for my 30s. And one of the things that I touched upon that is so important, but I neglected for so long, is money and finance and the importance of understanding it. And I say that as somebody who neglected it for such a long time, thinking that it was maybe trivial or superficial. And I would not call myself an authority on finance. There are so many people giving really good information on YouTube. I kind of wanted to tackle this from the perspective that I have, which is someone who was so terrible with money from a mindset perspective and is now okay with money. I would say good is good with money. I was the person who would refuse to look at my bank account because I was frightened. So I would just ignore it. I ignored my bank account and just spent as if there would never be any repercussions ever, which there are repercussions. And it's just one of those things that minimalism has really helped me with in terms of my understanding of wealth, my understanding of value. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you today about. I have 3 main points that I want to make, and they might seem obvious, but to me they were not obvious at all. Money was a source of anxiety for me, and I think there's an assumption that money will no longer be a source of anxiety for you when you have more money, but it's not really the way it works. It needs to be your attitude towards money that shifts for you to shed that anxiety, shed that stress. And if it's not immediately obvious, I should add that I am not particularly well off. Obviously I am advantaged compared to many, but with my upbringing, my dad was a taxi driver, my mum was a cleaner, so we did have 2 incomes, but we weren't technically well off. Point number 1 is that debt should not be taken lightly. And I say this because it is offered lightly. You don't have to necessarily prove that you can pay the money back. You can get credit cards, you can get overdrafts. And I think one of the biggest issues, especially in this country, is that often the first experience people have with having their own money is having student loans. And so people don't properly understand the value of money yet, and it completely normalizes the idea that you borrow money and then spend it. We are allowed to think that we can borrow money without having an actual plan as to how we're going to pay it back, because that's what student loans are. You borrow money with the hope, fingers crossed, that one day you'll be able to pay that money back, and it's not a guarantee. And I feel like it kind of primes us for borrowing money in the future with hope, just hoping, praying that we'll be able to pay this money back. If you don't have a strategy to be able to pay it back, you should not be taking that loan out. The thing is, debt is an obligation. You are living your life under the weight of knowing that you have to repay something. It can feel in the moment like free money or opportunity or something good, but you are indebted to somebody else for as long as that loan exists, and you deprive yourself of freedom when you take that loan. I want to just pepper in a little story here about kind of shines light on my attitude towards money, but also how easy it is to go into debt. I had an overdraft with my bank when I was at university, so I had my current account where my student loans and stuff went into, and I had a considerable overdraft. I think it was £1,500, and I really wanted a pair of shoes. I'm very reluctant to tell you which shoes they were because they are embarrassing in all areas. I'll tell you, they were Uggs. I really wanted a pair of Uggs. My friends had Uggs. I wanted Uggs. So what I did is I woke up one morning and I rang my bank and I asked them to extend my overdraft so that I could borrow some more money so that I could go to the shops and buy some Uggs. That is how lightly I took debt. I did not care. It did not bother me. It was a problem for another day, a problem for another version of me. A version of me that owned Uggs, though. When I think back to that, it horrifies me. It really does, because I don't think I am particularly alone with having this attitude towards debt. And so it's scary to think what kind of future people are setting themselves up for. I think it's really important to appreciate that when you buy something now, you deprive yourself of that money in the future. And because of a point I'm going to discuss later on, but because of interest and compounding interest, you deprive yourself of the interest that that money could have built. And I should add that buying stuff isn't inherently bad. That's not what I'm saying. You will need stuff to make your life more comfortable, and that's absolutely fine. But there is also a whole heap of stuff that's going to be sold to you that you do not need. And if you invest money into those things, you deprive your future self of having more money, of having more opportunity, of having more freedom, especially if you go into debt for it. And they make it so easy with store cards and credit cards and overdrafts. I think the main way to improve your attitude towards debt is to properly appreciate and understand the value that each pound or each dollar or each whatever your currency is has. Because it's easy just to look at a coin and see it as, this is worth a pound, but it's not worth a pound. You can turn this pound into something more than a pound, and then what you turn it into can translate to freedom and opportunity and a better life for your family. It means reevaluating the worth of a simple pound or a pair of shoes or a car. It's important to fully understand the price that you are paying, because it might feel like you're just paying £17. What could that £17 turn into if we put it into something a little bit more sensible? And again, you might really need the dress. You might really want the dress. The dress might benefit you so much. It's fine, but it's important to understand that that transaction is perhaps a little bit more complicated than just money for an item. The second thing that I have learned is lifestyle inflation is sneaky. It's coming for you. It wants to eat you up. The general definition of lifestyle inflation is that as you earn more money, you spend more money to maintain the general lifestyle that you lead. So let's say you got a promotion and that meant that you got a pay rise. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be left with more money at the end of the month, because your attitude to what you are spending is going to shift. You're going to think, oh, well, I've got more money, so I may as well treat myself to these things. And you end up sort of plateauing in terms of the growth of your wealth. But I don't think this is limited to promotions and pay rises and that type of thing. I think that as we get older, we sometimes think that we deserve better things, or if we work harder, we think we deserve more things. It's this idea of earning things not monetarily, but rewarding ourselves monetarily. So I talked about this in a video a while ago, but essentially we were looking to buy somewhere and we saw the most beautiful property and it was really undervalued. Like the price didn't kind of match what it was. Perfect. It was beautiful. And we put a bid in and it was accepted and I was so happy. But we were outbid and we didn't end up getting it. And I was very upset. But it meant that we ended up getting this place, which is so much cheaper and exactly what we need. We're just two people and a cat. We don't need this lovely big space, and we can own a lovely big space later on. But if we had gotten that house, we wouldn't have been able to have any savings. We wouldn't be able to put anything aside, and that would mean that as two self-employed people in this current situation, we would be screwed, like completely. There's not a chance that we could have been financially okay and consequently mentally okay if we had gotten that dream home then. And we didn't need that dream home then. What we do have now is we have a nice little flat that we got for a really, really good price. And it means now that we are able to save money. It means that when we eventually do need to buy somewhere bigger, somewhere that's the dream house that, you know, you die in essentially, then we also have a flat that we can rent out. This can become a source of income. My point is that even as somebody who identifies as a minimalist, I was a sucker still for lifestyle inflation. And if it wasn't for that beautiful soul who outbid me, I dread to think exactly where we'd be right now. So yeah, nobody is immune to lifestyle inflation. And I think if we're discussing lifestyle inflation, it's very important that we also discuss the need to impress people, or rather the need to want to be seen as impressive. It's not necessarily for other people. It could just be that we want to impress the person that we were. You know, like us in the past, we want to be an impressive version of that person. But it's so important that we don't compare our journeys to other people's journeys. We all have completely different starting points, completely different priorities, and ultimately it doesn't really get us anywhere. So if you ever find yourself giving yourself a little upgrade, really question why that is. What is it that you're trying to do here? Do you think that you deserve it? Do you think you're trying to be more impressive? Are you kind of trying to create the image of somebody that you'd like to be, whereas, you know, you could probably do some internal work to make you more like that person? I don't know. It's just something we're thinking about. The other massive issue with lifestyle inflation as well is that because it is so easy to go into debt, the symbols of wealth that once were are no longer relevant. You can have two people side by side, each in a flashy car. One person might have worked for years to earn the money for their car, and their car is truly, a symbol of the work and the effort that they put into their work. And you could have someone else who's just got it on lease or has just got it on the credit card or whatever. The car cannot be a symbol for success when you can get the car without having to be successful. Success is no longer a prerequisite for owning nice things because of debt. So these symbols are meaningless now. And I think that this is where minimalism really comes into play, because so much of it is about separating your worth from the worth of your things. That is integral. It's so important in terms of feeling generally okay day to day in yourself, knowing that you are separate and hold your own worth when compared to the things that you own. The things that you own are just like helpful sidekicks there to support you, to bring you comfort, to aid you in your life. And that's great. That's a great role for them to have. But they do not define you and your worth. That exists on its own. And the third and final point is something that I reckon I kind of still haven't got my head round yet, but it's so important to at least try, and that is fully understanding the impact and the significance of compounding interest and exponential growth. Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. But I think one of the things that makes it difficult to wrap your head around is the level of delayed gratification required. If you've got £10, you could buy a top, and then you own a top, and that's great, then you can wear your top. But if you invest that £10 and then you get interest on it, and then you get interest on your interest, and interest on that interest, soon it becomes a lot more money than £10, granted over a long period of time. But every single one of us has the opportunity to use a system like that. But it means fully understanding the worth of a system like that. It's there to help you. I used to think of savings as just putting money aside for a rainy day. I didn't quite understand the relevance of interest because I'm dealing with very small amounts of money here. But the idea is that if you are able to save a small amount regularly and then build interest on that and then interest on that, over the course of like 40, 50 years, you're going to end up with something resembling a nest egg, a life-changing amount of money. And again, I understand that we're all in completely different financial situations, and it might mean that even getting a bank account is a stretch right now. But it is a system that is in place that can help you. But the important thing is trying to get your living costs down by not giving in to lifestyle inflation, and instead understanding the impact of delaying gratification and compounding interest and being able to put some money aside. I was not one for emergency funds or anything like that. I was more for fun. I was fun, not emergency fund. That was my motto, even though I didn't know it. And you might recall last year, my cat, Bibsy, got very, very ill and she was uninsured. And we had to take her to the vet for a few days and she had to stay in overnight. And then eventually we had to have her put down. And we were not financially prepared at all. We had zero savings. We were in our overdrafts, but we still called ourselves minimalists. We were not immune from this. We were just a bit foolish. I think that there's this idea with minimalism sometimes that, it's quality over quantity. So you think, oh, okay, well, if I'm not using quantity, then I'm going to have to use the quality side of that and spend loads of money on the nicest things. And I think that attitude was rather detrimental to our savings and our investment in our future. So we found ourselves in this situation where we had no way out other than debt, and that taught us so much about security and preparing for rainy days and understanding that it is better to go without now so that we are covered in the future. But again, if you are not in the position to be able to save, try and make that something that you are aiming to get to. Even if right now all you can do is put aside £1 a week just to develop the habit. It doesn't have to be into a bank account, but develop the habit by just putting it aside. If you are able to put it into a bank account, then that's great. It's about developing that habit and being able to see just with tiny, tiny little figures exactly how things grow. And that might encourage you to put a little bit more aside once that habit has been developed. But I genuinely think, as somebody who could barely look at their bank balance, the most important thing to do is to confront it. I have been watching a few episodes of a show called Spendaholics because they just appeared on my YouTube and I love it. It's great. But one of the things that all of the people, all the spendaholics on that show have in common is they don't open their bills. They pretend the problem doesn't exist. It's so important that if you feel that way, you feel like you can't look the beast in the face, that you confront it. You stare it out and you work out a system to get through it, to overcome that beast, because you owe it to your future self. I'm going to put in the description a few people who you might be interested in watching. Stephan has a really good video on financial minimalism that I really appreciate. There's also lots of conflicting information out there. There's lots of people who claim to have the best methods for making money or the best strategy for saving, all that kind of thing. But it's about finding what works for you. But the first step, tackling it, definitely. I think that's just good advice for anything though. If there's anything that you find so difficult to look at, then you'd rather just pretend it wasn't there. Work up to just looking that thing in the face and confronting it, because you'll find it's not as scary as you might think it is. Our imagination is way worse than reality a lot of the time. So I hope you're doing well. If you like this video, please give it a like. And if you want to see more of this kind of minimalism content, please subscribe. And I shall see you in my next video. I hope you're all doing well. Goodbye.
I could never make it home with so much on my back. Carve me into pieces defined by all the things I lack. Go it alone, so many miles away from home. Take it down, sink like a stone. When the curtain falls on your show, it's time to